Morning, Nick. Great to see you.
Morning, great to see you too.
So, look, I'm really pleased. Thanks for giving me the time today. What I really want to discuss is obviously you've had a great career in B&I, where you obviously had great success and done that for 20 years. Now you've moved into education and doing something completely different. I thought it's just worth exploring about how you're finding that and what your observations are of the change.
Oh gosh, crikey. Well, yeah, I mean, it is a big move, isn't it? Really, from it's 30 plus years in B&I actually.
Is it? I try and knock it down as I get older.
Oh, thank you for that. You make me feel 10 years younger. Yeah, no, look, it's a big move in some ways, Chris. But you know, at the end of the day, we're in contract catering, okay, and it doesn't matter whether you are feeding, the workforce in a factory or an industrial heartland unit in the middle of the Midlands, or whether you're feeding lawyers at work in the city, or actually you're feeding people in airport lounges, or university students, or primary school children. We all provide food to the individual's place of work and or learning. I think that the biggest difference that I've found, which can work, in both ways actually, is that the education market in state education, particularly in primary schools, is very, very prescriptive. The school meals plan, the nutritional aspects that we have to work to are very, very tight. So the bounds of the same kind of flexibility and menu choice that you might get day in, day out, week in, week out in business and industry is very, very, very different. And I think that the biggest kind of feeling that I have moving into the education sector is, and not wish to belittle anything that I've done in B&I or anything in B&I, is that that every meal you serve has a very different meaning to the person who's the individual, the school children that we feed. It has a very different meaning to them. And in some cases, obviously, it's sadly going to be the main nutritious meal, or the only main nutritious meal of the day that the young child may be receiving. So actually the onus of responsibility is much, much, much greater. And indeed, because you're dealing with young children, then you have a much sort of heightened awareness of our responsibilities with regard to allergens, for example. The children are told what allergies they have got, and they're not necessarily as learned about it as adults who would be going through a staff restaurant in a law firm in London, or an investment bank in London. So you have to be on your toes permanently and make sure that everything you do is keeping these youngsters safe. And safeguarding is something that I had to get up to speed with very, very quickly in the industry. It underpins everything that we do, whether it's through recruitment and making sure that we have the right DBS, enhanced DBS clear employees on in situ, and to the point of service. Safeguarding underpins everything we do. So that's a big change in culture, if you like, for me, for the difference between B&I and education. But you know what, I'm absolutely loving it. And I have to say, and without wishing to offend anyone, over the last 30 years, I'm glad to say I'm the happiest I've ever been in my career to date. So yeah, it's a very rewarding industry to be in. And for a lot of our team members, who have also got young children at school, to be able to work between school hours and actually still drop their children off in the morning and pick them up after school in the afternoon, whilst earning a pretty decent income, which generally, because of the hours, ends up being tax free. It's a good lifestyle and a good industry to go into for that sort of period of people's lives when the children are at school. So yeah, a whole way of life that I've never experienced before, working 12, 15 hours a day and not necessarily seeing what the school gate looked like for many year on end. So from a parent's perspective, so yeah, it's been great, been really good start.
I mean, there's a number of areas you touched on. Shall we start with obviously kids? Because actually, there's going to be much more focus, isn't there, on nutrition now for children in schools?
Yeah,
and it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue. Do you see that within the schools as well?
Yeah, I mean, where do we start? I mean, because of the pandemic, obviously, and the all of the issues around obesity, mental health, and all that. From a political perspective, healthy eating and nutrition is, if it wasn't number one before, it's even higher up as a number one now. And when I say politically, that is important because a lot of the council's agenda drives the impetus that the heads and the business managers of each school abide by and have to place a focus on. So yeah, that's more important than ever. And we have to find ways as a caterer in the education space to achieve something in that area. And the old-fashioned way of doing it, and when I mean old-fashioned, I mean up to and pre-pandemic, was to have teams of people going around in assemblies and parents' evenings and having tuition, giving talks to children about nutrition and trying to make them more aware of it. But of course, you can only touch so many people like that. It's a very slow and laborious and clunky way of doing it. So technology is going to play its part in that. And I think the other side of half term, we have a webinar that we'll be conducting to 50 schools actually, just after school, about 4:30 in the afternoon, where the schools will send a link to all parents. And my nutritionist and company chef are going to be doing a webinar on healthy eating, what a minefield, and just explaining to our nutritionist, Claire will be explaining to the children and to the parents, and dispelling all of the misinformation that's out there in the press in terms of what is health, what you can eat, what you can't eat, what you can drink, what you can't drink. And David, our chef, is going to be creating a nutritious family meal with affordable ingredients in the background, so that we can try and get a sense of fun and entertainment into this and touch 50 schools at once rather than just one assembly or one parent evening. So
and how are you finding parents reacting now, particularly post-pandemic?
Well, at the beginning of September, when the schools opened properly for the first time, and when I mean properly, I mean, say for example, secondary schools, my daughter started year 7 during the pandemic. Of course, they never realized what school was like before because they were all in bubbles, classroom bubbles, year bubbles, never mixed with any other years unless they were on the school bus. And they went back in September, of course, and it was school as it should be. And from a catering perspective, we saw a lot of schools re-implementing and reasserting the benefit of children eating together in the dining halls, very often, which are sports halls or the main multi-purpose facility, and encouraging children to take up that. We've seen, you might be interested in this, I don't know, we've seen, I'm sure my peers and competitors will have seen the same, but we've seen quite a big drop off in school roll numbers in London, and we've seen in pockets an increase in roll numbers in the regions as people have moved out of London, and also obviously moved back out of the UK following following Brexit. So in that vein as well, we're seeing the free school meal entitlement in Key Stage 2 picking up, where more and more people are unfortunately, should I say, eligible for free school meals. So that's that's an interesting sort of part of it.
And what surprised you most about the move into education?
Well, it kind of re-surprised me, if I'm honest, and that is how skilled and how commercial the teams are in the units. You know, they know how to make a buck. You know, they know how to, well, they know how to feed 200 children on a post-war budget, quite frankly, you know, which is what the industry is given. You know, they are so cost conscious. They are so aware of portion sizes. They're so aware of their children that have got allergens. You know, they know them on I mean, they know every single child in that school. That, you know, so from a customer service perspective, from a commercial catering, you know, basic acumen, I'm sorry to say, B&I, some of the best I've ever seen. It was I've seen it before, you know, years ago. I went into a secondary school back in Baxter Smith days, actually. We ran the Misbourne in Great Missenden at the time, fun enough, where my daughter goes to school now. And they were making their own biscuits, whereas, you know, in B&I at the time we were buying them all in and making their own biscuits and selling them for 40p, making a great margin, which meant that they were able to afford more for the main courses and more. You know, and it's the way they just apply the basics of catering and make things themselves is, in layman's terms, yeah, I'm sorry, B&I, they put you to shame.
Let's talk a bit about your B&I career, because obviously that, as I said, dominated 30 years of your career.
Yeah.
And you worked for Sodexo Gardner Merchant, as it was in those days. You worked for, obviously, Baxter Smith. You worked for Baxter Story for many years, and during the great years of that period of time. How have you changed during that period of time? How have you grown? What are your great lessons from that period of time?
Well, look, I mean, let's go back. I think very quickly, go back to Gardner Merchant days. You know, when I was a trainee manager, you know, in the late 80s, and in the late 80s, and you know, in those days, you know, you had Gardner Merchant and Sutcliffe going toe to toe pretty much in every single contract, and there was this massive respect for two organizations, but both organizations had one thing in common, and that was they were fanatical about training. And anyone who was with those companies or leading those companies at that time, the businesses that they now run and or work for in a senior management capacity still have that training, that fanatical approach to training at heart. I mean, I don't wish to name them, but there are two very great Scottish men who have that in our industry, that have that training mentality all over their business. And, you know, I think a few of the things I've learned, but the greatest thing I've learned, I was fortunate to work with a very talented senior leadership team at Baxter Story for sure, and having, you know, the luxury of you know, being part of a senior team there, and being part of the board, and being part of decision making, and teams that were reacting to all kinds of scenarios that our industry throws at us, and watching how Alistair and Noel particularly went about running the business. I learned a lot, and also John Bennett.
Yeah, because the industry went through a great period of change from what it was in the 90s to where we get to today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's become much more about fixed cost. It moved away from subsidies. It did change dramatically during that period of time.
Oh God, hugely. But I mean, The thing is though, Chris, that it happened sort of, some people say quite quickly, but it didn't. It happened every day, a little bit at a time. It's a bit like your children growing up, isn't it? You don't notice it, but somebody who hasn't seen them for 6 months goes, wow, where did that come from? But it happened little bit by little bit every single day of the year, and you kind of naturally just move with it and find ways to re-engineer yourself and businesses. And that's as I say, that's without being overly complimentary to people, but I did learn a lot from watching the senior leadership team in Baxter Story WSH. And to this day, every day I get home, and if I've got decisions to make with regard to the business, however big or small they may be, then if I haven't got that instant gut answer myself, I sit down and I think, what would Noel have done? What would John have done? What would Simon have done? What would Alistair have done? And I think about, and they've each got very different styles, everyone in business, haven't they? You have to, but you have to learn from it. There's no point in making the same mistake. If you sat there and watched something happen, the mistake happened because of it, there's no point in repeating it.
And how about yourself? Because actually, you've come through quite a journey in the last few years as well, haven't you? And the pandemic has been quite a journey for you as well. How's that all impacted on you?
Yeah, but I said it at the time. I said it to Anna, my wife, at the beginning of it. You know what? Everyone's worried now about the pandemic, and some of us, ended up, in the grey zone, and just as a matter of fact. And I said, you know what? When we get to the end of it, everyone's going to wish they made more use of the time. And yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I wish I'd made more use of the time, done a bit more DIY, done a bit more gardening, sorted a few things out, done a bit more business planning, dare I say. But yeah, I think it's been a good couple of years to reflect on, and certainly had a bearing on what I wanted to do next and the part of the industry that I wanted to go into next.
Yes, I suppose that's what I was trying to kind of get to, because actually one thing that comes across is that you are actually quite deep. You are quite a deep thinker, and you have actually spent quite a lot of time thinking about things and changing.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. I think it was very obvious to me that the sector that I'd worked in for most of my career was going to come out of the pandemic quite slowly, and which we're seeing, aren't we? Albeit that hopefully it's starting to race a little bit faster now. And that actually, as it did come out, it's such a saturated market that it's going to be, it's going to be difficult out there in that part of the bit, and that needs time to settle down. I just felt like a change, and I wanted to bring all of my experience together from sales and operations and all of those different sectors into a world where I knew I could make a difference, and one which I also feel is probably more pandemic proof than others. Some people may call that selfish, other people may call that narrow-minded. But I think it's sensible. Yeah, it's sensible, and I want to make a difference, and we're already achieving that. And loving working with Mike and Michael, and I worked with Michael, as you know, many years ago, when we were rookie area managers for William at Baxter and Platt. So it's great, and yeah, I'm loving every minute of it. I think the education sector's got a lot to offer.
How do you think the sector's going to change, evolve from now on?
Well, if you look at the big contracts that have been let over the last sort of 10 years or so, certainly since universal infant preschool meals were implemented back in the, gosh, what was that? Back in the coalition days, wasn't it? Big local education authorities, 50, 100, 150, 200 schools tendered all at once, with big contracts, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million pound contracts. Those are few and far between now. A lot of it's going kind of full circle. Schools are pulling away from that and doing their own thing. So I think from a a business growth perspective, we need to be nimble on that and probably approach that in less of a big cluster mentality. I think from a secondary school perspective, then that's going to get closer and closer and closer to business and industry. You feed, it's incredible. I would welcome, and I'd love to show some of my former colleagues what it's like. But in a secondary school, 2 services a day, a morning break and a lunch service, 700 children served, paid, eating within 40 minutes. I mean, and that's often done by 3 or 4 personnel. It's an immense achievement the way they go about it. So anyway, I think at secondary schools, the offer will migrate nearer and nearer and nearer to what you would see in B&I. In fact, it's a lot of them are there already. And in primary schools, I think there was the last all-party parliamentary group meeting was last week, the week before, and of course it's very geared by the funding from the government, which at the moment has a limit of £2.34, and unless anything changes on that at the moment, then the schools and the caterers going to struggle to push things on. We've got national living wage at 6.6%, which arguably is pushing labour costs up nearer to 7 or 8% as you go through the ranks. We've got food inflation in March. We're probably looking at 5, 6, 7% as a minimum coming in March, and the government needs to start listening on that. And I know Sharon Hodgson, and who's the chair of that group, is pushing that hard. And if that needs to change from a commercial perspective, the schools need more money so that they can proportionately increase the amount of money that's given to the caterer, so that we can start really pushing the boundaries on nutrition, healthy eating, and the way we do things.
I mean, the encouraging piece is, from the feedback we're getting, schools are taking food much more seriously than they used to in the old days.
Yeah.
And actually it is much more on the agenda, because they know it's what attracts kids in as well.
Yeah, they are. And I think a lot of schools were anyway, Chris, is my observation. And I think a lot of people's perception of schools are taking it more seriously has rightfully come from Stephanie's initiative at School Food Matters, which is how some of the councils are coming together to start monitoring and ensuring that the food quality improves. But the part that I personally don't see that's new is where you have chefs from other sectors coming in and help, claiming to help the sector improve its food standards, because I don't say, I think that's a bit of a PR stunt that isn't helping the industry. But there is a greater focus on quality of food, but that ultimately comes at a price, Chris, which is why I go back to the APPG, and where there's only so much you can do, isn't there, with a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk. There's only so much you can create. So we need everyone. The schools need some relief on that. But the importance and focus is definitely, though, not on food quality generally, is on healthy eating and nutrition, for sure. And that's the difficult one. That's a difficult one in primary schools, because most children don't like it.
I was going to say, how are the kids reacting? How do the children react to it?
Yeah, that's where we have to work our magic, because what we as parents and the government wants our children to eat isn't really what they want when their parents aren't around.
Well, I'm sure we were no different, but yeah.
Yeah. So you have to, that's a difficult one. But again, it's how you have to be clever how you engineer that. And all of the caterers in the sector over the last few years found very clever ways of getting nutritious food into the children. You know, the obvious one and very basic one, putting beetroot in brownies, for example. You know,
I hadn't thought about that one.
Yeah, I mean that's been done for a few years
sure.
now, but there are ways we can do it. But you know, you're hiding it from them to get there. I mean, some of the children are lovely, but you know, you've got to make it fun. I think if we make it fun and we make the salad bars fun and the healthy options fun, then we'll start being able to achieve something in that area, which is why we're doing these webinars. You know, if we get them interested in healthy eating at a younger age, I mean, it's easier with the teenagers at secondary school, much easier. But with the young ones, if we can get them excited about nutrition, healthy eating, what it means, why we say you should have 5 a day, why we say that, you know, you should eat nutritiously balanced meals. But if they can understand it and the penny drops at a young age, then the government, we, and as parents and caterers will win.
Well, Nick, can I say thank you for that? It's been great talking to you. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.